We've all heard this name before, Ryan James Wedding, a big wig in the narco game. He was a Canadian snowboarder, went to the Olympics, and then began trafficking cocaine, and is now perhaps one of the biggest names in the Sinaloa cartel and generally in the entire cartel atmosphere. Let's get into it because him and a bunch of people have been sanctioned. A few people in major cases have actually been arrested, and we're starting to see, I want to say, his empire crumble, but I'm not entirely sure that's even accurate because he's still at large and is likely still running some major game.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original with yours truly, Katarina Szulc. All right. Ryan Wedding was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario. He's a fellow Canadian, and I don't want people to take offense to this, but growing up in Thunder Bay, to be fair, I've never been, and that's for a reason. It's not really known for my American listeners and viewers. Thunder Bay, Ontario isn't really the Mecca of Canada. There's a lot of shady and unfortunate stuff that goes on over there. But Ryan Wedding then moved to Coquitlam, British Columbia, sort of my neck of the woods, close to Vancouver, in the mid to late 2000s. He made his move from Olympics and sports into crime. Okay. He was allegedly involved in large cannabis grow ops and then later cocaine trafficking networks. I'm going to kind of explain to you guys his rise to becoming a right-hand man for the Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel, which is where he's at today. He's alive and well, I think, living in Mexico and has been living in Mexico for a while now. In 2008 to 2010 is when Wedding started to gain a lot of media attention. For a lot of people who watch and read my stuff, you guys kind of knew the name Ryan Wedding, but it wasn't to an extent where I think people underestimated his role in transnational drug trafficking and just how many connections he has in Mexico, the US, Canada, Colombia, and across Europe, particularly when it comes to hiding and laundering money. So in 2010, Ryan was convicted in the US for attempting to buy cocaine from a government agent. It was a setup, a sting operation. He spent 4 years in a Southern California prison, which is where I would argue he really built his network, particularly his US-Mexico network, because prior to this, he was growing in the sort of Colombia game, but I think this 4-year sentence allowed him to become the kingpin he is today. And he is a kingpin, not even arguably. It's objectively, he's him in the game. You know, it's so funny because I talked about Ryan Wedding on the Sit Down Crime podcast, and people were saying, oh, Katarina is just blowing smoke up this guy and just really hyping him up. Maybe she has a crush on him. People, let's come down to earth for a moment here. Okay, you guys know that I nerd out about this and I analyze all of the guys in the game and women in the game. When you take such a significant character and you look at the timeline of events of his life and how successful this person has become in organized crime today, of course, I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and I'm doing it objectively, like it or not. Authorities allege that from the 2010s to the early 2020s, Wedding expanded into large-scale cocaine importation. So it went from Colombia to Mexico, to the US, to Canada. He really has and has had all of these bases covered. He became a dominant Canadian distributor, and his nicknames that he acquired were El Jefe, the boss, Giant, and Public Enemy. Okay, I'm going to tell you something right now, and you guys know that I've, poked fun at some of the nicknames that the narcos are given. But if you're being given the nickname El Jefe, it's not for nothing. He's always been allegedly linked to the Sinaloa cartel, particularly the Chapitos faction, and I also got a lot of heat for saying this, but truth be told, as that civil war broke out between El Mayos faction and El Chapo's faction of the Sinaloa cartel, I think this gave Wedding space to further strengthen his empire with the Chapitos because he wasn't really part of this war. And I think for him, business continued as usual. He also wasn't living in Sinaloa this time. He was in Estado de Mexico, Mexico State. Now, prosecutors allege that several murders tied to his operation occurred in this window from November 2023 to 2024. And I would argue, especially with some information some sources have given me who were once close to Wedding, this continues on, these murders. And these killings became central to these murder charges that have been laid. I want to make it very clear. Wedding is not just successful because of his business and entrepreneurial mindset. Wedding is successful because he is extremely violent. Every single figure that I have spoken to who has crossed paths with Wedding or knew him or knows him personally has made this very clear. Wedding will kill to get ahead. Point blank. And we know this when someone like Wedding, known as El Jefe, is feared, whether it be by his US counterparts, Colombian counterparts, or even Chinese counterparts. If they are not willing to work with him or work with him on his terms, they are a dead man. In October 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice publicly charged Wedding and multiple co-defendants in a superseding indictment alleging bulk cocaine shipments, a continuing criminal enterprise, multiple murders, conspiracy to murder a witness, and related offenses. Then in late 2024, his alleged second-in-command, his right-hand man, Andrew Clark, was arrested in Mexico and later transferred to U.S. custody, where Andrew Clark began to allegedly, or so I'm told, sing like a fucking canary, okay? Andrew Clark was Ryan Wedding's right-hand man, and he knew at the time, everything about the way Ryan ran his operations, who he was conspiring with. And it is said that Andrew Clark gave up a lot of this information, which I'm sure is what has led to so much information being revealed to U.S. authorities on Wedding's operations and who he's working with, which is why we just saw this breaking news this past week on so many charges around Wedding. This year, Ryan was added to the FBI 10 most wanted list, and at the time, the reward was $10 million. We now see that that has jumped to $15 million. Let's talk about the latest, okay? The new sanctions, the arrests, the reward increase, and the indictments that span across the continent, for real. All right, so the U.S. Treasury announced sanctions targeting Ryan Wedding as a notorious trafficker. This was kind of described as coordinated with other U.S. government steps against Wedding and his network. The DOJ also announced further criminal actions and arrests of multiple co-conspirators from Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. This included Deepak Paradkar, an Ontario lawyer. I'm sorry, that name is going to not go over well with me. He was arrested and charged in connection with basically advising Wedding to murder a federal witness. Deepak was allegedly allowing Wedding to listen in to conversations, confidential conversations with clients who Wedding considered to be adversaries or affect his business, and even told him, well, if you don't want this to go to trial, or if you want to avoid some sort of legal action, kill so-and-so, allegedly. This lawyer is now being extradited to the US to face the US legal system. And you guys know how I feel about things like this. It's like, yeah, Wedding is a criminal and he's doing illegal things. We all know this. But then you have someone who's supposed to maintain integrity. I mean, I don't know, it's a lawyer. But then leading to people being murdered, that's crazy work.
If you're looking for a recovery shake that actually does its job, check out Formula One from First Form. It's a rapid digesting whey protein isolate made for post-workout recovery. That means that it gets into your system fast to help the muscles repair and cut down soreness. It mixes ultra smooth, it's easy on your stomach, and it tastes legit. All the flavors are good, but for me, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is hands down the best one. Plus, it's NSF certified for sport and Informed Choice certified, so you know it's clean. First Form is giving free shipping on orders over $100, and if you don't love it, they'll give you your full refund. Hit the link in the description and grab Cinnamon Toast Crunch Formula One today. I want to thank our partners over at Ammo Squared. They've built what they call America's ammunition reserve, basically an ammo savings account. You sign up, pick from more than 70 calibers, set your auto buy budget, and either choose a shipping schedule or just let your reserve grow. Over time, your ammo stacks up and is stored for free in a climate-controlled facility in Texas or Idaho until you're ready to ship. No minimums, no extra fees. It works whether you got a small budget or just don't want to drop a few grand at once. Thank you so much, Ammo Square, for providing such a cool service and supporting the show.
What I really want to talk about are the women in Ryan's network, because one thing is for sure about Ryan Wedding and his network that's redundant is that there was no gender discrimination here. He has a lot of women running a lot of the operations for him. So Daniela Alejandra Acuña Macias, she's a Colombian Instagram model. She's a prostitute. She's a Colombian national identified by OFAC as Wedding's girlfriend. She has been Wedding's girlfriend for some time. She basically portrayed herself on Instagram. The Instagram is gone now. As an Instagram model, she was going on a lot of luxury trips, had a lot of fancy jewelry. And U.S. officials say she had a secondary function, which was approaching rivals through their girlfriends. So she basically, Wedding would tell her, I need to get close to so-and-so. So get in touch with the girlfriends, be friends with them. That way we can get close to my enemy. She would embed herself socially to collect intelligence, report back to Wedding. She received hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and gifts. OFAC says she was fully aware of what she was doing and that the money she was receiving was from drug proceeds. I mean, of course, the person who put these two in touch, allegedly, was Carmen Yelinet Baloyes Flores. Jeez, like, we just got some crazy names in here. Make it longer, why don't you? She was a prostitution madame turned witness hunter, essentially. So she was running her high-end prostitution ring. I find it so funny when we're talking about really good-looking girls, really expensive girls being prostitutes. It's high-end prostitution. Don't get it wrong, not a hooker, just a high-end escort. Tomato, tomato. Anyways, Carmen, also a Colombian national, ran a prostitution ring in Mexico. We know this is very common in Mexico City. I see it all the time. Okay, Colombian girls working as prostitutes. A lot of them are trafficked. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them are there because there's a lot of money in it. Now, Carmen allegedly connected Daniela with Wedding. These two started a relationship. It was obviously multifunctional for Wedding. And Carmen also allegedly helped facilitate the murder of a federal witness in January. So this is where this case kind of blows up. It all has to do with the murder of this federal witness. And the federal witness was part of a case where 16 defendants were charged in superseding indictment alleging bulk shipments of cocaine to Canada and 4 murders. This case took place October of last year, 2024. And this is where things started to get murky, and I think Wedding was trying to cover his tracks, and everyone in his network was helping him do so. Carmen has also been charged or sanctioned along with Daniela. You can see here, this is really painting the picture of how international Wedding's network spanned, right? You have the Canadian lawyer, you have the Colombian ladies, and then let's look at his wife. Yes, first comes the girlfriend, then comes the wife. Miriam Andrea Castillo Moreno. She was identified by OFAC as Wedding's wife, and she handled laundering duties. She also helped facilitate acts of violence. This lady has gained a lot of attraction for all the wrong reasons. Castillo kind of represents the operational home front in a way, okay? She's a trusted insider to Wedding who keeps money and logistics flowing while Wedding hides in Mexico. Castillo hasn't been hiding, okay? She's been doing her thing. She also raises a child with Wedding. So they're parents to a son, I think. And this is kind of a detail that underscores how deeply Ryan's personal life overlaps with his criminal operations. We've seen before how capos include women in certain operations. Typically, they're working as, like in this case, sicarias and money launderers. It's also quite interesting how he was using Daniela to get close to his rivals. Yeah, I don't think she was doing much of a good job at it, which is why all these people got caught. Now, we also have the general. He was a former cop who became an enforcer. Edgar Aaron Vasquez Alvarado, known as the General, is perhaps the figure who best illustrates Wedding's ability to infiltrate Mexican state structures. You guys remember how I've been saying for so long that the Mexican federal government is corrupt and on the payroll? Well, Ryan Wedding's payroll is one of those. It's important to keep in mind that aside from Ryan Wedding's violent tactics, he also has some really airtight money laundering tactics. OFAC went through this, but we had known about this for a while, any of us who follow this news. And I also spoke to a source who gave me some information regarding just how seriously Ryan Wedding takes his money laundering, because when you're cleaning millions of dollars in cocaine profits, you have to be able to use that money, make it economy ready in a way. And in order to do that, you have to launder money. Ryan Wedding was doing this through mainly Canada and Europe. One guy, Roland Skolovsky, a Toronto jeweler operating under the name Diamond Sar, moved money through jewelry and cryptocurrency. This is really Ryan going back to his East Coast Canadian roots and locking in with whoever he knows that could make this feasible for him. And then you have Gianluca Tiepolo, a former Italian Special Forces member. He managed Wedding's fleet of luxury vehicles and ran tactical training camps for his hitmen, allegedly. I'd also like to mention, when going through the list of items that were seized, because I always find that quite interesting, and you kind of get a understanding of just how much money was being made and what the priorities were. A vehicle seized here, and I've never seen this before, was a $13 million Mercedes CLK GTR. This is the kind of asset that's rarely found outside of elite collections. And typically, I don't see vehicles like this in narcotics case files. This is a vehicle, it's different than the typical G-Wagon, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bentleys, whatever. This is an elite collector's item. It's not meant to just impress your adversaries. They knew what they were doing. And then you have Christian Diana and John Anthony Fallon, who helped run Tiepolo's Italy and UK-based companies. They were acting as fronts to hide weddings assets. You can probably tell by now that Canada and Europe, jewelry, cars, crypto has been a major form of money laundering for Ryan Wedding, and it's working. And I'd like you guys to keep in mind that for years, intelligence officers and journalist Katarina Szulc have warned that Canada's underworld, although it's less violent but deeply capitalized, is interacting with Mexican cartels in ways that really remain very unexplored publicly. And Wedding's case is literally blowing that wide open into the public view. We've seen this because of just how hard these sanctions and the $15 million bounty has hit international headlines. For now, the US bet is the financial strangulation. Whether that's going to be effective when targeting someone like Wedding is very unclear because the way he's running his business is pretty unprecedented. So freezing these assets, pressuring the associates, we know that information from his associates has been kind of the key pipeline to Wedding, whether that be Andrew Clark or now Daniela, the Colombian girlfriend. These are people who will talk if it means saving their own face. But dismantling this corporate scaffolding that lets traffickers pretty much operate invisibly is the key, and it's not going to be easy. It never has been. My guess, honestly, to wrap this all up, and with all the deep dive that I've been doing into Ryan Wedding's case over the last couple of years, I don't think Ryan Wedding will ever be captured. He will likely be killed, whether that's by American forces or collaborative efforts eventually, maybe between Mexican and American forces, or an adversary somehow managing to turn on him. Will we see Ryan Wedding in a cell? I'll make a bet with you guys. I don't think so, to be completely honest. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. He's been doing this for nearly 2 decades, completely under the radar. And even when he gets caught, even when the heat is up, someone like Wedding has such a big ego and a track record to match that I don't think he starts to sweat. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original with yours truly, Katarina Szulc. And as always, see you next time.